You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 11, Asylum.
Welcome back to another episode of Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And I'm Norman Lau, and we are so excited to be back after a very long break. And I'm sure all the Star Trek Prodigy fans are out there. You're just excited as we are to have your cast and crew back. I'm sure you're excited to have us back too, as we bring all of these new episodes for you to watch with us as well. And just like our flagship Mission Log podcast, each week here on Mission Log Prodigy, we discuss every single episode of this animated series, discover what makes each of them special, and see if there are any morals, meanings, or messages that we have learned.
This week, episode 11, Asylum. Please remember that Mission Log Prodigy is an in-depth podcast, so if you haven't seen Asylum specifically, you may want to put us on pause. We'll wait. Welcome back. Watch this episode and then come back and hear us talk about it. I did the joke early. It's okay, friends.
Mission Log Prodigy is produced for YouTube and as a regular podcast, so please be sure to engage the like and share buttons like they do, like all the kids do. We'll do this part, the like and share buttons, and subscribe to us here on the Roddenberry Entertainment YouTube channel. Please make sure to listen to all of our podcasts at podcast.roddenberry.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the podcasts, or wherever you listen to Roddenberry podcasts. And you can also follow Mission Log Prodigy on Twitter at ML_Prodigy to keep up with all of our latest news and updates.
Before we jump into the recap, here is why this podcast is so unique. We want to hear from you. Yes, you specifically, the younger Prodigy fans out there who would like to share their thoughts on the show. So please send us a 1 to 2 minute voice message at missionlog-prodigy@roddenberry.com. And in your message, please answer these questions. What is your first name and your age? Did you like the episode? What was your favorite part? And what did you learn? We look forward to hearing your comments, which will be featured at the end of our show. And just to start things off, here are our answers to the exact same question. So, Norm, putting you in the hot seat, did you like the episode?
Okay, so coming 8 months after the last episode, which was Immortal Star Part 2. Okay, so I liked it, but not for maybe the obvious reasons why one should like it. One, because we're back on the air, and two, because it was great, or I should say it is great, and it is worth the wait. But it's because I think that we've taken this really big step forward from where we left off. And I'm wondering, after a little bit of this has settled, I'm wondering if I'll like it for more than just we're back. More than just, I can't believe that 8-month period is over. And I'm wondering if our young cadets out there and, their parents or their guardians or their vice admirals feel the same way. I do. I don't know. How do you feel? How do you feel, Ashley, about it?
I definitely liked this episode. I think it is very much in the tradition of premiere Star Trek episodes, whether that be mid-season finale or new season, or mid-season premieres or new season premieres, not finales, in that everything in this episode is the same but different. We are reestablishing the status quo, which ultimately, in the macrocosmic lens, hasn't changed that much from the beginning of this show. What's different is the particular details, right? All of the players are here, the ship is here, space is here, but how we're relating to each other is all new and different. That being said, I think this is one of the more fun versions of this episode because it's not just a checklist by rote. I think it is a much more creative approach than some of the other kind of recap episodes that we've had across the rest of New Trek, but ultimately it serves that same purpose. I think where the funness comes is in how we approach it, and we do get a little sprinkling of new characters who we've been waiting on for quite a while. So overall, I would say I really did like this episode.
Awesome. All
right, let's get into the nitty gritty. What was your favorite part of the episode?
I think it was when it's definitely when Rok-Tahk tried to math out the velocity to jump from the station to the protostar, because it wasn't just all of a sudden Rok-Tahk knows science, right?
Yeah.
The entire episode was all about Rok-Tahk not knowing just science, but now having a complete new way of being able to learn science from Starfleet's resources. But remember, folks, it's not that this episode was an unearned scene. Rok-Tahk was stuck in time for the longest amount of time alone in time amok learning science.
Mm-hmm.
So that and this scene, that scene and this scene tied together for her love of, I'm more than just this giant rock creature that everyone thinks is dumb. You know, I'm a scientist and I love science. And that was awesome. And Riley's voice acting, of course, sells that scene too. Yeah. How about you?
I would say it's very similar. It's the moment when Rock learns how many different types of science there are. It is a beat that to me felt super, super similar to, if you remember from season 1 of Discovery, the Tilly and Stamets, and they use this moment to be kind of evocative and throw one of the swears in because it was streaming. But
Right.
their kind of shared excitement about math and science. However, I think because Riley is a bit of a younger voice actor, there is a sense of wonder that Rock brings to the world of Star Trek and space and this type of space exploration that it just hit different here than it did for me watching the first season of Discovery. Again, like maybe the purity of having an actual child involved in saying these lines that even though we have from Time Amok that we know that Rok-Tahk has this huge amount of growth and has a maturity and a capability that we don't always see on the surface, there is still room for this kind of wonder. That moment like really touched me right in my heart and soul. I was like, oh no, this is gonna make me cry again.
I know.
Not Prodigy coming for me like this. Speaking of science, what did you learn?
Well, you know, what I love about Prodigy, there's the message on the surface, and then there's the deeper meaning of that message on the surface where it is kind of learned over the course of the episode. And this one's the whole, sometimes you have to take that leap of faith. You know, Janeway says that at the beginning, and literally they did that at the end. Sometimes you just have to trust the people that you have come to know and love and depend on for thick and thin. You know, it seems that sometimes when the consequences are so dire, the only thing that you can really do is just trust somebody and then trust fall. And that's kind of what they did at the end. You know, I know they're falling through space, which is kind of ironic because you don't really fall through space. You just kind of move through space, but they did. They all just took a deep breath, trusted Rock. Rock did the math, and they did their best. And then all of a sudden, Janeway with the tractor beam trust fall catch. Amazing, right? That was amazing. So I love that. That was like this just very nice undercurrent that you learned throughout the course of this episode. How about you?
I would say, so over the course of in between these two chunks of Star Trek Prodigy, I watched a show called The Expanse. And in The Expanse, there is a character who throws herself from one ship to another without the benefits of a spacesuit. So I was very happy that everybody here was at least semi-protected in their spacesuits. But much the same, that you have to take this leap of faith and that you have to trust everything, the literal universe as is represented by this quadrant of space has your back. And that is a hard thing to know as a grown person. That must be a hard thing to know as a member of Starfleet, which we laud. Even in this episode, we want to join Starfleet. We love Starfleet. We laud as this incredible organization, but you have to just trust that everything's going to work out because the universe has your back.
That's right. Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that, Ashley. And that was fun. It was fun getting back to the questions. And I can't wait to hear from our young cadets when they turn in their answers as well. But right now, it's time for the recap. So here we go with the recap for Star Trek Prodigy, Episode 11, Asylum, written by Kevin and Dan Hageman, and directed by Steve and Chang An and Sun Shin.
Okay. The theme is back for Spall, and it says good as ever. Opening all the feels in the opening credits of this episode. Asylum opens on an underwater world, giving very white people on the red planet vibes from Star Trek Into Darkness. The crew of the Protostar has to rescue a space whale. I'm sorry. An aquathon, and she's one of the last of her species, so like give her some respect. From poachers, indigenous poachers, to be fair. They don't seem to just be space poachers. They seem to be of this world, but that's not great still, without violating the Prime Directive. It is a tall order. I thought this was a training exercise. It's not. Like Pinocchio, they eventually find themselves in the belly of the whale until Janeway beams them aboard the Protostar and they head into safe interstellar waters. While underwater, Gwyn had a flashback to the apparent death of her father, as we saw at the end of the last chunk of episodes. And Zero swears to undo the accidental harm he caused in the season finale or mid-season finale and help Gwyn uncover everything that she had lost. They work together with the help of the medical bay to achieve this. In Dal's captain's log, we learn that it's been weeks since the mid-season finale. I think that's a good time jump. I'm really happy this didn't pick up 5 seconds in the big Star Wars tradition. Thank you. Then we quickly get a different version of First Contact when the crew of the Protostar meet the first Denobulan that we've seen since Enterprise. Lieutenant Junior Grade Arnis Frex of CR721, aka the Federation's furthest comm relay. And they are excited to be there because this is their first contact with Starfleet, and he is less than impressive. But that's okay because the crew isn't technically Starfleet either. His whole vibe seems designed to let the crew know that not everyone in Starfleet is a shining beacon like Janeway is. A quick scan through a database lets everybody know what race they are. We learn that Murph is a melanoid slugworm, and as we were told, that is in fact in Star Trek canon. Go and check that out if you want to know more. No one still knows what Gwyn is, and Dal might be able to know what he is if he goes to Starfleet headquarters. Could this come up later in future episodes? Who's to say? Only time will tell, because as he says, Starfleet does have the answer. Arnis gives the crew the run of the con relay, and then we smash cut to Chakotay and Janeway. Oh, it's just a simulation, of course, which Janeway has been reviewing in her renewed mission to find her best friend. Apparently, he was taking the Protostar to the Delta Quadrant. I will say I get why Janeway would absolutely not go back there, and it's a nice reference to Voyager to have Chakotay be revisiting this particular part of space. The con relay provides greater facilities for the Protostar crew to explore their interests. Rock gets the lowdown on just how many sciences there are in the galaxy. Gwyn and Zero have access to medical equipment, so they are able to work on memory retrieval, kind of like we saw them doing on the Protostar at the beginning of the episode. And Jankum and Dal get to use the replicator to make hot dogs, meat tubes, food for kings. Arnish tries to download the ship logs from the Protostar, and we get an ominous reminder of the weapon on board. Remember, it's not actually Zero or Gwyn like we were teased in the first half of the season. All the systems on board the con relay go haywire. Everything goes wild. Science isn't able to solve this. They're not able to explore in any more depth. Gwyn's medical pod fills with a dangerous liquid, almost drowning her. Jacob is belted with hot dogs. While immersed in the pod, though, Gwyn's memory comes back to her. The memory of her father resurfaces, and she gains clarity just in time for the crew to burst into the medical bay and save her, or inspire her to swing out her sword and save herself, which is a really nice moment that she doesn't have to be full damsel rescued here. She is able to find it within herself through the power of this truth and this confidence to ultimately save herself from the pod. Woo! In a nice moment, until CR721 basically self-destructs. Arnis is mad about it. Everyone shows off in the corridor until Arnis makes a mad dash for an escape pod, seemingly leaving the crew behind to fend for themselves. And then Dal speaks the popular line that we've already evoked many times here today. Sometimes the hardest thing is to take a leap of faith. With everything shutting down and all the escape pods lost, what are they going to do? Well, everyone suits up, pops out into space real quick. Rock does some mad science, and they all jump over to the protostar. The calculations are good, but not perfect. Luckily, Janeway was on board to snap everyone up real quick, and no one is lost spinning through the void of space as Jankum feared. Meanwhile, on Taras Labora, I didn't think we was ever going back here, but here we find ourselves. Human Janeway and her Starfleet crew, including David Diggs, show up and uncover a Starfleet badge while searching for Chakotay, along with a mystery creature, or at least a mystery to them creature, the Diviner. Quote, he's alive, and hopefully he'll have answers. End quote. I don't think so. The end.
Nicely written, Ashley, and everyone give her a round of applause because there was so much excitement. Why wouldn't there be? It's a new episode. We're going to jump right into it. We have so many things to say, so many things that we have observed, which is why our next segment is called Observations. So, so much to get to, Ashley. Where do you want to start?
So let's start at the beginning. It's a very good place to begin.
Oh, very good.
Thank you. Right. Did the ship that they were using to chase the Aquathon not look like Slave One to you?
It was. There were so many evocative themes, I should say, quote unquote themes going on this planet. A la, what was the name of the planet we were referencing? It was Namibia.
Yeah.
So yeah. Great scene though. I mean, it's wonderful to jump like right back into the whole Starfleet is going to strange new worlds and seeking out new life and new civilizations and boldly going underwater where no ship has gone underwater before, except for the Enterprise into darkness. Okay, so I know this is a small thing, but I love, my favorite thing of all time in Star Trek, my favorite prop is the original series communicator. When Dal pushed his protostar communicator for help, it gave off the original series communicator chirp.
It sure did.
I was like, my puppy radar ears went off. I'm like, this is 24th century tech, yeah? Just curious. Let's see what else we have here. I do love the Federation space station. I love the Denobulan. I love Arnis. He was funny. He was weird. He was a little probably antisocial because he was the only one on that station, and kind of did a very not Starfleet-y thing by just leaving people there to die.
I think I think we're not supposed to dwell on that part of it. I think it's supposed to be like, this is un-Starfleet-like behavior, right? Which is why he's on the communications relay. That's the furthest from all things. I liked seeing Denobulans again, though. Like, I'm a huge Enterprise fan. I think the Denobulans are one of the aliens that feels the most truly alien in their customs. And I really liked getting a chance to revisit them. And also, we get to see more Andorians this episode. Commander Tysus, the Andorian, if you're a Hamilton fan, I'm sure, like myself, you recognize David Diggs' voice immediately. But Andorians are just so cool. And I like that the animated series are giving them more time to shine than live action series. And also, I wonder if he knows Jennifer.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because they all kind of coexist in this same time period. So maybe.
Yeah, I like that on Janeway's ship, she has an Andorian and a Tellarite with her, and a Trill officer.
She has a Trill on the bridge, yes, who I believe is voiced by Jamila Jamil, I believe is that character.
And they're all representation of, well, I don't know about the Trill so much, but I know obviously Jankum was told that the Trill the Tellarites were founding members of the Federation, which made him insufferable to no end, obviously. Right.
I mean, he is a Tellarite, so that is canon. But also, like, did Larry Nemechek have a hand? I know he is an ardent defender of the Tellarites.
So, okay, there's a big thing, Ashley. I need you to help me with this because I'm not sure how I really feel about having Murph categorized as an actual species now.
Tell me, you don't love that Wesley episode wherein these characters were introduced in TNG? Yeah.
So I know it's just, I have thoughts about this that I'll bring up later, just in the realm of this. Are we feeling a little bit of kind of like Dal being like a Skywalker chosen one now, with the only way that you're going to get information is to go see Starfleet Command immediately by walking through that bioscanner.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a weird thing, I think, because in Star Trek we venerate the Federation and we venerate Starfleet, even though the villains of almost every single movie are high-ranking Starfleet officials in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And the ultimate goal of this show and the characters on this particular show is to join this gigantic pseudo-military organization, and to go to Starfleet Command. I think even based on the pilot episode, a visit to Starfleet Command was inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be interesting what it winds up saying about Dal. Like if they have the answer, but the answer is in Starfleet Command, it makes me wonder if this is some sort of intelligent design storyline.
I have thoughts about that too. Our observations section is amazing because it's like feeding right into our discussion section. But what we haven't discussed yet, and you brought this up in your recap, why haven't we talked enough about the whales that were on that planet?
Yes, the aquathons.
The aquathons. So,
which is a great term, great fake science term.
George and Gracie come to mind, obviously, from Star Trek 4.
Don't they though? Cetacean Ops over on Lower Decks.
And our aquathon was pregnant, just like Spock said about Gracie.
She has babies.
Right? And also was very into darknessy with the whole sequence. Maybe this was one of those homage type episodes. Who knows? All right.
Well, we also have Arnis straight up says saboteurs.
Saboteurs.
And it's a real Shatner delivery of that particular word, which I found very funny. But the last thing I want to bring up here is, can we just talk about thrusters and spacesuits for a second?
Yes, let's please do.
I'm also watching For All Mankind right now, so like this just like pinged my radar so hard. But I know this is a show for all ages. I know that we had to create drama and that we needed a reason why we couldn't just like flip up over the ship right away. And so the answer is there's no thrusters in the spaceship. NASA astronauts, as long as there have been NASA astronauts, have thrusters in their spacesuits. Why do Federation cadets not have thrusters in their spacesuits?
Yeah, and it reminded me again. So we had the Into Darkness reference one with what happened at the very beginning with the underwater planet. Into Darkness reference 2 when Kirk and Khan jumped through the Enterprise space to the Admiral Marcus's super ship space and thrusting through.
Speaking of evil admirals.
Right. And thrusting through space and thrusting through debris. So yes, you're all right. You're absolutely right about that. And yeah, it was just, I think it was like a drama-ish type of thing that we were looking at.
100%. Okay, but that's my nitpicky. I know you want to talk about Chakotay.
That's big. That's a big reveal.
Ooh, he looked good.
Yeah, he looked really good. I am so excited to see like where this goes, because I knew that it had to have been like maybe a hologram or a memory or some kind of thing, because we saw the bottle of champagne, crash and kind of christen the protostar. And what is happening with this story, Ashley?
It gets more complicated and more layered the further we go along. In my wrap up, I have a theory.
Oh, I love theories.
But every time it's like pulling back in. It's like pulling back the revelation about who Gwyn really is and what she really represents. Like you think on the surface, it's these two sort of parallel plots that are going to converge, and then as the plot thickens, there's so much more hiding underneath there. And to wrap it up and present it as Janeway and Chakotay is just like so satisfying to my fan brain.
Yeah, I know. And that hug was powerful. It was like more than friendship, but not in that Janeway Chakotay shipper kind of way. It's just that they've come to this point where their careers are starting to diverge. She's Vice Admiral Janeway now, of which he makes a point, and he's Captain Chakotay, and he's going to go out and do his captain thing. But now we're here with her looking for him. And why did he disappear? And why didn't you call Chakotay? Ooh.
I liked her phasing through the hologram as well. Like, I just thought that was a really cool kind of visual moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Great way to like segue right into like the bigger points, because, you know, just like our mission log show, we go into some heavy discussion, and there are really a lot of things, you know, to kind of chew on in this episode. So what's something that was important to you, Ashley, for, you know, that came to the surface?
So the thing that really came to the surface for me, and you may have noticed it in the recap, is both on the protostar and then when we get over to the comm relay, we have all these characters working in pairs with a very specific mission in mind. And it feels to me like these two types of storytelling, and then echoed by bringing everybody through the scanner, we're driving home the idea that everybody is unique. And it can seem like a platitude, and it can seem really quaint in like that elementary school kind of way, depending on how it's delivered. But it is true, and it is particularly true in this episode. Asylum drives home again and again and again how different each of these individual characters are and how wonderfully they work together. To have them partnered up in this way throughout this episode, I think is really lovely to see. The most obvious on the nose example is Zero and Gwyn, who had shared some story time previously, but this duty of care that they seem to feel toward Gwyn based on what happened in the mid-season finale is really fascinating to me and really sweet, because we don't have a chief medical officer among this crew. We don't really have a doctor type, and I wouldn't have pegged the Medusian to be that. And I'm just interested in how this is going to sort of Rubik's Cube unfold, because I think there's going to be a lot more here, and seeing the uniqueness and seeing everyone's strengths, like Rock's calculations on the fly, like the math is cool moment is like next level here. I just think it's really special.
Mm-hmm. I love that so much. Yeah, I love how they're still making sure that we're following our characters' storylines as much as we can. I do have a point to make about that later on. I love that, in a way, building everything up from like episodes 1 to 10, and now everything's kind of paying off here, because I like that we have had the separation of time from Tars Lamora, A Moral Star Part 2 to now. And even if they don't know it, they're doing the Starfleet thing. They've trained all this time to do all of these different Starfleet missions to prove that they're Starfleet worthy, to make sure that they know how to operate their ship and they just don't look like a bunch of thieves. You know, when they roll up onto Starfleet's door, they've done it. They've done the work. They've done the training. They've done the due diligence. They are Starfleet, for better or worse, you know, aside from just putting your hand on the Starfleet Bible and swearing the oath like we're Starfleet. So they're not kids anymore. You know, they're not unintelligent anymore, and they're not, you know, disparate and separate anymore. They're all trained, you know, because they all wanted to be something better. That's what I think, that's kind of like what Janeway kind of started herding them all to do, right? And the icing on the cake there was Janeway pinning the Starfleet pin onto Dal. Not Dal pinning it on himself, but her pinning it onto Dal.
And the appropriately designed Starfleet pin from the appropriate time period.
That was just a great moment, and it's just kind of like, it was like that gear shift. Like you could feel something change. Like I could feel it in the water. You know, I could feel it in the air kind of change. So what else you have, Ashley?
Truth always comes to light. So the Gwyn and her memory of it all was inevitably going to be a plot point. It was definitely going to be this hanging Chad over a lot of this half of the season, if not over this character forever, ultimately. I'm really glad that we made quick progress on it this episode. I found that really, really satisfying, because it's an answer that we as the audience already know. So keeping it hidden from everyone else only works for so long before it makes them seem not smart enough for not picking up on it in the first place, or it makes Gwyn seem deceptive and untrustworthy for hiding it for so long. So this could have been seeded over 10 episodes. Mm-hmm. I think bringing it to light here tells us a lot about the power of truth and the healing in truth. And I'm glad that we're not going to get Gwyn and Zero at odds with each other. I'm glad that these two characters are now evolving and working together. But it is true. If you are a young person listening, the truth will always come to light. And I think that this is a lesson that we've been learning over the course of the series. And I liked seeing it this obviously represented in this episode. And I just really liked Gwyn and Zero. Like, I want to see them drinking tea, looking out at a starfield, discussing, life, the universe, and everything. They're a really lovely pair.
And almost kind of like an unexpected pair, like you said, like
100%.
earlier on. Yeah. And maybe that's the strength of like where our characters are starting to shift now.
Maybe this is my new ship. I don't know. We'll see.
How do you ship this? Is it Gwyn Zero?
Ooh, or
that
Zero
sounds good.
Gwyn.
The Zero Gwyn. Yeah.
Weigh in. This is our Twitter poll now.
All right. So
what's the ship name?
Audience, you decide. Help us decide, because it's pretty fun. Yeah, I had a similar point in a little bit of a different direction though, because there is this, for lack of a better term, truth literally hurts segment of this show, because the diviner, he never, even in his own way, he never really hid the actual literal truth of what the protostar is to Gwyn, which is why Gwyn's having this dilemma and these memories starting to surface of her father saying, like, it's a weapon, it's a weapon, it's a weapon, because it is. As soon as it plugged into, or as soon as Arnis started examining the data logs, the virus happened. And there's a little bit of a fun play on words here. Kids, ask your or folks, or go to Google, look up this thing called the Trojan horse virus, because it was built on this historical
used to be the
example.
number one thing we were scared of.
The Trojan horse virus. Yeah. It's literally a virus that it'll hit you when you least expect it, and then go even further and look at the Trojan horse from the Trojan War, and all things will be made completely clear. Because
and then read the Iliad.
and then go back and read thousands of pages of ancient Greek philosophy. Did
Arnis's name, did your brain go Arnim Zola the whole time? I know you're like fellow comic book nerd.
a little bit, but I think I was waiting for him to do like the Phlox, kind of like the puffer fish expression when he was really scared before he jumped into the shuttle pod. So hopefully that'll happen, because I know all the episodes are finished up to a point. So they probably can't change any animation at this time anymore. But I hope we get to see a pufferfish Denobulan face, because
more Denobulans just in general, they're so cool.
Yeah, and obviously worth exploring, because they have a lot of potential, I think, for both drama and comedy at the same time, just like Billingsley brought to Phlox and Enterprise. So I guess the big question with the protostar is, if it were in Chakotay's hands at the very beginning, and if it were the reason why he was able to go back and forth in the Delta Quadrant, because he said it will just take less time to be able to explore, the big question between, and if it's going to get answered between episodes 12 to 20, what happened? If that even is remotely going to get answered. But I think it might be based solely on what you said about not just hanging Gwyn out there for this obvious plot device, because we have so much more story to tell. And who's to say that what happened at the consequence of Zero exposing Zero's Medusan form wasn't just enough to be able to hurt her, but temporarily. So we can move past that and get on to more important storytelling.
It also asks the questions of intent, right? Like Zero's intent in doing that wasn't to harm Gwyn. So maybe that also, and which opens up a larger conversation about consent, of course, but maybe that's also part of the reason why Gwyn, I'm sure there's going to be a relapse at some point in the season, but seems to be making like a very speedy recovery.
I think you're right. I think it was about, she was just collateral damage, in that, because ultimately, a Medusan's power is obviously very, very effective. But then
we're going to see it again. It's going to be employed again at some point.
Oh, I think so. But maybe at the time it needs to be, maybe that's where Zero hesitates the most.
Ooh.
For fear of what happens. There's always a consequence to superpowers. So
Yes, unfortunately.
with great Medusan superpowers comes great Medusan responsibilities.
Yeah, that's a T-shirt. Put it on a T-shirt.
We have time for about one last discussion point here. Actually,
I think you and I dovetail on this, so I will start it because I think your answer is much more articulate than mine. But it's questions of faith here. Faith is a really loaded word that can mean a lot of things. I don't think we're going to delve into that on this particular episode, but I think they distill it down really perfectly to the cast and crew makes the idea of faith seem pure and powerful. So their faith in each other, their faith in Starfleet, their faith in science ultimately is what leads to the happy ending and ultimately the success of this episode, even if maybe a con relay gets kind of janked up in between. But faith is something that we as humans will grapple with for the rest of our lives. And I really commend everyone who works on Prodigy for tackling big, complicated subject matter like this for all ages audience. That's a hard thing to do. And I think that it's really presented in a way that is graspable. Whether this is your first time considering the idea of faith or your 151st time.
I like bringing up the example of the trust fall. I brought it up earlier. And if you aren't familiar with it out there, what it is there's somebody that stands behind you that you trust. And then you are facing away from them with your hands crossed over your chest. You're completely at the mercy of whether or not they're going to catch you. And I actually do that live. I did that live. That's so weird. It's just instinctively when I do that.
Yeah.
And then you fall backwards, and not in a way where you can catch your balance or land on your own 2 feet, but in a way that you are caught by the person that you have put that trust in implicitly. And that's why I like bringing up the hug sequence with Dal and Janeway, because
that's so nice.
It was a forward trust fall to her. He had to overcome so much from the very beginning. Do you remember all the way back in Tars Lamora when they finally find the ship and he says, we can't trust anyone. We can't trust adults especially, and certainly not adults that are wearing all of these military uniforms. We're a bunch of thieves and we're thieving this ship, and we got to get out of here and basically like start our own lives and carve a path for our own destinies. And look at where he ends up. He ends up being not necessarily seeking the approval, but that hug just basically said, now we can move forward with a completely different path, one that's better for all of us. And I think that that's something that's monumental in his character building. And I think that's like where your examples of like Zero and Gwen, Zero basically put Gwen in a, in an isolated experience where Gwen had to trust her.
Yeah.
Do the right thing by her again, right? Because something could not have gone ultimately right.
And something almost did, right?
Yeah, right.
We went right up to that line. Also, I just want to say, you're such a genius that you talking about this has unlocked my brain. And I was like, oh my God. And we saw Dal's horrible mom. So when he meets Janeway's going to become his mom, or at least his maternal figure.
And that also kind of like begs the question, when you have this leap of faith, and it is, both literal and figurative, because he with Rock at the end, when they're about to jump off of the space station, he made everyone else believe. That's what a leader does. Everyone believed that he believed in Rock. And even though things didn't work out exactly the way that they wanted it to, they believed that Janeway in the end would catch them. So all of these little moments like lead up to that. Now, my concern is what happens when Dal meets the real Janeway, Vice Admiral Janeway. I know, because hologram Janeway is there to help them grow. Vice Admiral Janeway is the real person with the real experience behind her, and not the experience that hologram Janeway had with these kids to make them into these Starfleet cadets. So that's kind of like that is in human Janeway. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see if that Janeway's maternal instinct, because we have brought that up before, will she be able to access that in lieu of, or in front of them being these thieves who stole a ship that belong to Chakotay, making her have to search further and harder to find the person that she cares about most. There are all these little details that we're going to eventually see. So, and that's where we are. We are at a wrap up right now. And we're going to talk about kind of the things that we want to see and hope to see happen, or maybe not. I don't know. Ashley, what do you think?
You set me up really well, actually, because this episode has left me wondering, when are these two crews finally going to meet? Mm-hmm. There's a sense of scale to the world of Star Trek Prodigy in particular that I think is really hammered home in this episode. We've seen Janeway before. We've seen, I think it's Lieutenant Essentia, who is the Trill, before. We've seen a little tease of the Chakotay before, but everything has been fairly contained to the Protostar, or where the crew of the Protostar is located at the times, aka Tars Labora. And this really gives a sense of our two worlds crashing into each other in this powerful way by seeing Admiral Janeway's crew in Tars Labora. And I mean, we know the Protostar is out there, but it can't be that far away, because this crew is operating at a lower level than a Vice Admiral's crew is going to be. We have dueling Janeways holding it down in two parallel storylines that are just like this track that at a certain point has to turn and has to converge, and how that's going to happen as the plot thickens accordingly. I am really, really excited to see. The more we learn about Vice Admiral Janeway's crew, the more they seem like a family as well. If you look at the dynamics that we have going on there, with the brusque Tellarite, he's kind of like your weird uncle. Tysus seems like the enthusiastic brother. So if they're a family, Chakotay is family, and maybe if his crew is mostly survived, bringing a family of his own, and the Protostar crew is a family, what are all these families going to be like when they finally get together? What is the family reunion of Prodigy going to be like? Are they going to fight? Are they going to be stronger together? Of course they're going to fight. We need some drama. Like, can you imagine if Vice Admiral Janeway shows up and throws all of these children who look up to a version of her and her likeness in the brig? That's going to be devastating. I can't wait. And Prodigy has taught us that characters are capable of change, right? Gwyn coming over from her father's side, the diviner, to the side of her fellow crew members. I'm just excited to watch all of these families grow into a proto family. Like this episode, as all good premieres do, has just opened up my mind to so much wonder and possibility in the future. Like, I can't believe we have to wait a whole other week.
Well, at least it's only 1 week instead of like 8 months, right? At least we have that saving grace. Yeah, there's so much to be mined in a 24-minute episode, and it's like this every single week. And again, kudos to Dan and Kevin for writing this, and for Steve and Sung for directing this. It's hard to kind of distill down your thoughts, when there's so much that has been somewhat answered, but even more so introduced. And I think that's where I'm like at this weird space of, how do I feel about this episode? Because there's so much new information that we've been given. And especially when it comes to kind of like the kid species or lack thereof. So we know Jankum's, he's Tellarite. We get that, right? We know that Zero's Medusan. We get that. But when they categorized Murph, I'm just like, okay, the world is starting to get smaller. The more that you add labels and definitions and data and information to kind of like this nebulous unknown space that we had all the way in Tars Lamora, the more and more and more that it becomes kind of like codified. That's a big word for basically saying explained from the unknown. That was the fun of kind of like, where are we going with the story? And then you have Gwyn, which is weird because she walks to the bioscanner and Arnis is like, yeah, you're unknown. We'll just make you unknown. That's fine. But all of a sudden Dal comes in and he's like, Starfleet, something required for more information. Like, why isn't Gwyn like that too?
Yeah.
Right? Because she's unknown. Dal's unknown. They're both unknown. So they both should be important. But now you have, like you said, actually, you have these kind of like these three realms starting to converge on themselves. Like as the circles get smaller and smaller and smaller, you have our Prodigy crew that we began with, that we fell in love with, and now they're starting to grow. Then you have this peripheral crew of Janeway and Chakotay and the Voyager legacy that's starting to become more and more and more a part of this story. And then you have kind of like the details that are filling the in-between. I guess my biggest concern is taking the focus away from our children, from the children characters, because these are the characters that helped us fall in love with the story to begin with. But then as Star Trek fans of a certain age, we're also going to fall in love with seeing Janeway again, Vice Admiral Janeway, Chakotay, their reunion. And we're going to be so much more maybe interested in what's going on there than the story that brought us here. And that's my biggest concern. My biggest concern is I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to ask our audience this. Does having the reveal of so many actual high-ranking adult characters like Janeway and Chakotay make this story feel smaller because the focus is shifting away from the original story? And I don't want our kids to get lost in the process. I don't want them just to be part now of this larger story. To make this this big explanation very, very, very clear, I don't want our hobbits to get lost underneath the underfoot of the big men, of the Gondorians, of the soldiers. I want our hobbits to be there front and center always. So how do you feel about that?
I think that is a legitimate concern because introducing more characters and more plot means that some characters and some plot that have become beloved to us up to this point are going to be set by the wayside. And I do think there are characters, because this is still this is the back half of season 1. Mm-hmm. So there are characters that up to this point, like Jankum Pug, for example, hasn't had a full focus on him. He's still very much a supporting character.
True.
I think you and I have this refrain from the first half of the season that is trust the Hagemans. Mm-hmm. And we will and we do. And I trust that as they take time away from our Protostar crew, it's ultimately in service of them, because at the end of the day, they are the stars of the show. Dal and Gwyn are the main characters. And if we sway away from that too much, then it's not Star Trek Prodigy, and this is not Mission Log Prodigy. And I don't think, I say this with confidence, with my full chest, I don't think that's going to happen.
Thank you. Thank you for reassuring me, Ashley. And
I got you.
And I know that we're going to have more to say about this as the season unfolds. We still have 9 more episodes, thankfully, to enjoy. So here we are at the end of our show. Thank you, everyone. Ashley, I hate to say that we have to say goodbye now, but we have to say goodbye.
As Norm said, we reached the end of our show, which is absolutely devastating. Thank you for joining us here on Mission Log Prodigy. If you enjoyed our show, and why wouldn't you, please make sure that you smash that like and subscribe button and share it to our Mission Log Prodigy playlist on the Roddenberry Entertainment YouTube channel. We collect them all in one place for you, or check out the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. Mission Log Prodigy is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, production and technical direction by Earl Green, whom we love very much. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is missionlogpodcast.com. And if you would like to support Mission Log directly, why wouldn't you? You can do so at patreon.com/missionlog.
Well, thank you everyone for coming back, for spending your time with us as we look forward to the rest of Star Trek Prodigy in the back half of this first season. We look forward to sharing our thoughts with you on episode 12 next week. And we're so very excited to say this once again as we close the show every single time. We would like to leave all of you, as we do at the end of this show, with these very special incoming transmissions.
Receiving listener communications. Message playback begins.
What's your name?
Dietrich.
How old are you?
4.
Did you like the episode?
Yeah.
What was your favorite part?
Them figuring out how the base station exploded.
Figuring out how the space station exploded?
Yeah.
What did you learn from the episode?
That you jump in the direction the thing you're gonna jump in the direction it's going.
Yeah, you jump in the direction that the ship is going? Mm-hmm. That's pretty good. You're a smart kid.
So what's your name?
Sarah.
And how old are you?
7.
Did you like that episode?
Yes.
And what was your favorite part?
When Murph was sticking its tongue out of space when they jumped from the ship.
That's pretty cool, huh? Mm-hmm. And what do you think the episode was trying to teach us?
To work as a team and never stick together.
Okay, very good. And who's been your favorite character so far?
Murph.
Okay, all right, cool. Thanks, Sarah. Can you say bye?
Bye.
What's your name and your age?
My name is Rook, and I am 7.
Okay, Rook. Did you like the episode?
Yes.
What was your favorite part?
With the mathematical stuff.
Oh, you like all the formulas popping up?
Yes. Around Walkback.
Yeah, and she was figuring out how to get aboard the ship?
Yeah.
I like that stuff too. Did you, what do you learn?
Sometimes you just have to do a leap of faith.
Oh yeah? Got to risk some stuff?
Yeah, you have to risk.
Take a risk?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, say bye.
Bye.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.